good, everybody? It's your boy Villy. We back at it again. Another week, another sample tutorial. This week, we're going to take a look at how I make a Leon Thomas or a Lucky Day type of sample, right in that vein of soulful R&B that both of these artists can either collaborate on together or individually. Let's get into it. So looking at our chords, our first chord is a E minor ninth, going into an F sharp minor ninth add 11, going into a D minor ninth. We run those three chords back, and then we end on an E major seventh. So let's go ahead and take a look at what the chords sound like. So real smooth, real soulful. That top note is just a B, just really just playing on top of it. Adds a nice little vibe to the chord progression. All right, so moving on to my effects for my piano. Starting off with the EQ, taking out some low end. My second EQ is taking out some low mids and mids. When you're working with pianos, sometimes it can be really heavy in those kind of frequency ranges. So I just try to take some of that out, especially if you're planning to have an artist on top. That's kind of where their vocal range would sit. My next EQ, just taking a little bit of that bass section. I thought it was still hitting a little bit hard on the low end. Compressing it and putting on some reverb. In this last compressor, I'm not doing anything in terms of messing with my input, output, my threshold, my attack or release. This one just adds some color into it, and it kind of acts like a limiter. That's why I added it onto my piano channel. All right, so for the next sound, I have this lead from Sky Keys. Real simple sound, really to kind of get some atmosphere. For my effects for this lead, just EQing, just really taking out the low end, making sure that it won't conflict with the bass, and just kind of lowering down the volume a little bit, and also just throwing a compressor on there to help with the overall volume. Next, I'll go into the two vocal samples that I'm using. So really just trying to get a nice little soulful old school vibe. And that second vocal preset is kind of like some newer style that you would hear some newer R&B. Looking at my vocal effects for these two, are really just taking out the low end, making sure there's no low end in that vocal, and then also just compressing this for overall volume and kind of gluing this. And for my second vocal, I'm just EQing the low end again. Like I was talking about before, I really want my singer to occupy this kind of range. So I'm just dipping out these frequencies where it could probably conflict with. Also throwing on a compressor on here to help with the overall volume and gluiness, and also throwing in some reverb as well for that vocal. I also want to note that these two sounds double as texture, as well as kind of providing a melodic element within my sample as well. All right, so let's take a look at our effects for our vocals. Simple EQ, taking out the low end and then lowering down the volume, and adding a compressor to help glue it into the mix. Similar principles for my second vocal. Like I said before, I really want my singer or artist to occupy this kind of vocal range or these frequency ranges, so I'm dipping out anything that might conflict with that in another sample. Also throwing a compressor on here again to help with overall volume and gluing it together, and lastly throwing on a reverb. My next sound is a guitar sample. It's really there to just add some air candy, nice extra effect in the overall sample. Let's take a look at the effects on the guitar sample. Here, just wanted to brighten it up a little bit, and like I said before, just kind of doing a simple cut in that mid to low mid range so my singer can occupy it, and also just making sure there's no low end coming through at all so it doesn't conflict with my bass. And lastly, throwing on some rev spring. Next, let's take a look at the bass that I played in. All right, so I'm not a professional bass player by any means, but I could do a little something on the bass, and that's what I played in. My effects on this bass guitar, because I had in mind, I kind of wanted to do this kind of Thundercat-esque type of bass. I wanted to kind of make it growl a little bit, and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about exactly in the guitar rig. But I knew this like kind of this low mid range is where I was gonna kind of have my bass shine in. Taking out some of that lower frequencies because I didn't want it to kind of be a typical bass sound. But like I was saying, I used this Desert Funk preset. I deleted the other two effects on this. I think it was just Control Room Pro. That is an unenabled. Pretty much what I'm leaving on here is my auto wah filter and then bass invader, and I'm selecting high boost as well, so I can kind of get some of that that mid to high frequencies back in the growl, and also lower down the bass a little bit as well too. Throw in some R bass mono just to kind of help with the low end. Even though I want it out, I still want my bass to still have some presence in the low end. Moving on to my parallel compression, just this compressor, no other effects on this channel. And then lastly, for my bass bus, just taking out a little bit of that low end because I didn't want it to be too heavy. Throwing on some Pultec EQ. Throwing on another compressor to kind of help glue my initial bass sound and my parallel compression bass sound together. And then another compressor, like I talked about on my piano. I just kind of like the color it added to this and also giving it that limiter effect. Throwing on another EQ, took another hit to that bass section just so it wasn't too kind of boomy on the low end. And then also throwing in a fruity soft clipper for my bass bus. Last but not least, my drums. I'm trying to learn how to play drums. I have a drum kit, but for right now, I use a sample. As time goes on, you guys might see some more live sounds go in. But for now, I just wanted something quick that I can kind of help kind of finish off the beat and the exact vibe I was looking for. Let's listen to it. And it pretty much just repeats like there. But it's a really straightforward drum loop, really nice, exactly the vibe I was looking for. I can't stress that enough. Let's take a look at the effects for my drums. Just throwing on an EQ, just kind of helping it, brightening it up a little bit for like the hi-hats and the overhead. Kind of giving the snare a little bit more body. The kick helping it out, not on the low subby end, but just kind of that really boomy part of the kick that you want to hear. Just cutting out some really low end, and like I said, taking a dip so my bass can have some room to live. All right, so let's take a look at the effects on my instrument bus. Everything except the drums and the bass is going into here, and then we'll take a look at our master channel effects. So for my instrument bus, just taking out the low end, making sure my bass has a place to sit, throwing on a compressor, help glue all those sounds together. Again, this second compressor, I think I'm going to start adding to a lot of my channel strips. Not really doing anything. Sometimes I might mess with the output just to kind of, use it as a limiter pretty much just to raise the volume. But I think I like the color that I get out of this when I run it through. And then lastly, a soft clipper. And moving on to the master channel effects, with a Pultec EQ, SSLG bus compressor, tape J37 from Arturia, throwing in a parametric EQ, throwing this compressor on it again, just to get that color and that limiting effect, and lastly, a fruity soft clipper. All right, now that we've gone over all the effects, let's take a look at the final product. All right, y'all let me know what y'all think. I was thinking about adding a bridge to it. Maybe I'll do a part 2. Y'all let me know. But this has been my take on a Leon Thomas Lucky Day type sample. Let me know what y'all trying to hear next week. It's been your boy Billy. I'm out.